Okay. So when you took the deck off of your boat, it was a little bit wider than the entire boat all the way around because it's the way, well, that's the way we stripped the last one anyway. So when it goes back on, it should be a little bit wider in the boat, hopefully still, but we're not going to assume that. We're going to go ahead and dry fit this whole thing first, make sure there are no issues, and if there are issues, we'll take care of them now before we have epoxy running everywhere. And in order to dry fit it, it's a pretty simple process. You start by aligning everything as close as you can. And then you want to go down the sides and feel on both sides. Make sure that you can still feel that lip on either side of the boat all the way down. Make sure that the hull isn't sticking out past the deck, because if it is, then you know you got a problem. So I'm sticking out just a little bit up here, but I see when I push on it with my thumb, it goes right back in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my carpenter square and a pencil. I'm going to run all around the edge at about 3/4 of an inch in. And your goal is basically, we're going to set some screws for a dry fit and ultimately for the fit. And I want it to be in about 1/4 of an inch past the inside of the hull. So about a 1/2 inch total. So I got a little bit of lip here. I'm going to make it close to 3/4 of an inch. And that way there my screws will catch on that shear clamp on the inside. 1-inch screws and fender washers. Now what the fender washers are for is you don't want the tiny head of the screw doing all the pushing of the hull down onto the shear clamp, because it'll tend, remember this is cedar and it'll tend to pull right through. So we take these fender washers, gives us a wide surface area that'll pull, you know, pull the hull down a little bit better. Don't worry about the screws, because they're all going to come out later anyway, and then you got a decision to make. Either you can countersink them and put little brass screws all the way around, or you can take them out completely, drill them and put dowels in it, but we'll get there later. All right, so right now I am going to draw my line all the way around. All right, so the first screws that I'm going to set will be on the stems on both sides. Now I've got 3/4 coming up here, but I don't want to put a drill hole where they can come together here, because if you think about it, underneath that's exactly where my inner stem ends, right? So I don't want to do that. So I'm going to back off a couple inches here so that I know that I am going right down into that little breast hook that I put there. All right, now I'm going to go down the other end and do the same thing. Well, now that I've got a screw at both ends, I know that I'm not tilted one way or the other, right? So now you have to go down the boat again, and again check it on both sides. Make sure that there's plenty of overhang. And if you find that you have a problem at your bulkheads, then you take the screws back out and shave the bulkheads down a little bit, and that'll allow you to push down a little bit further. All right, but we're actually looking pretty good all along here. Any place where the hull is sticking out, it would appear that I can push it back in. So I think we're in pretty good shape. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure every couple of feet and set a screw in. So I'm convinced that I have enough screws in here now that I can go ahead and drill my hole every 6 inches. So that means these 2 feet are going to kind of split them in half and split them in half again. And that will give me a nice smooth bed all the way around. Okay, well, I'm going to take these temporary screws out now, and then we're going to mix some epoxy up. So the key here for you is to make sure that as you're looking at this thing, you're perfectly comfortable and confident with the fact that you're about to pull this off, lay epoxy all the way around this thing, put it back on, and then screw it on, which will make it very, very permanent. So if you're uncomfortable with something that's going on at this particular point, stop and figure out why. And if you can't figure it out, give us a call. We'll try to help you through it, figure out what the problem is. But at this point, you have to make sure that you're comfortable the way it's going to be, because that is the way it's going to be as soon as you put the epoxy down. So we are a little bit runny here. We're not looking to be thick, because we do need to penetrate a little bit of wood on the hull side of all this. So the goal here is to make sure you cover every inch of it. Now, the inclination is going to be to lay it on there real thick, so that you get a nice ooze and it all fills up real nice. That would actually be wrong, because you got to remember, once you put the lid on there, you don't have access to the inside of this boat until after you cut your cockpit and your hatches, which is not going to be instantaneous, to say the least. So any ooze that you have that starts dripping off of this thing and down into the boat, you're not going to be able to get to that for, well, will most likely be at least a day. And for many of you, much more than a day. So you don't want to skimp, but you don't want this stuff oozing out and running all down the boat and everywhere.